What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. Today I wanted to talk about the Mecole Hardman situation and how it appears the New York Jets are interested in flipping Hardman for a draft pick and trading him away. And that kind of makes sense now. We'll talk through the whole process and just like where things went wrong and what ended up happening here. But since they are at this point where he was inactive this past week and they've showed zero interest in actually using him, this is kind of really the only other choice that they have. I mean, they could put him out there on the field, but the Jets have shown you through the first 5 weeks of the year that they don't really have much interest in doing that. In free agency, he signed a 1-year, $4 million deal with upside up to $5.5 million. It was, a swing on someone who was supposed to come in and be a gadget guy. And, I think a few things happened here. And just to talk about what he's done so far through 5 games. 1 catch for 6 yards, inactive this past week. But this is a guy where, it's not like he was a bum in Kansas City. And granted, with a Patrick Mahomes, I wasn't going to expect him to put up that level of production necessarily. But this is someone who's averaged at least 35 plus yards per game over the 3 years prior to joining the New York Jets. This was someone who could have came in, and I thought anyway, giving you 3, 4, maybe 500 receiving yards at the absolute most, somewhere in that range, a gadgety fourth wide receiver. And he has been lapped, essentially. This is, again, it's a little bit bizarre, but I think the first thing and the most important thing is that Xavier Gipson has kind of taken his role. Xavier Gipson makes this team because of his return ability, and he muffed a punt and really 2 punts in the game against Denver, and that holding on to the football is something you really, really want him to be able to do, and that's something that he does have to get better at. But we've seen his snap count go up the last couple of weeks on the offensive side of the football. That's something that I think that they're going to continue to do and mix in. I would like for Xavier Gipson to be a guy you can get the ball in his hands 2 to 3 times a game. I'm not saying you force feed him targets, but, give him an end around once a week, or, throw him a bubble screen and let him see what he could do after, with the ball in his hands, or put him in the slot and run a slant and get him the ball. There are creative ways to get him the football and get your best playmakers the football. And, what else doesn't really help is Randall Cobb's playing time. And his time has come down a little bit, but Randall Cobb received 73% of the snaps in that game in week 3 against the New England Patriots. You had Hardman with 3% of the snaps, but that number's come down to 39 and 35 the last 2 weeks, which that's a little bit more palatable. You could live with that. But Gipson the last 2 weeks has been at 19% and 31%. So if it's going to be Randall Cobb and Xavier Gipson splitting the reps from the slot, then the only result is that you don't really have a spot for Mecole Hardman at that point. And I do think that's a big factor, is Xavier Gipson, climbing the depth chart as quickly as he has. And, obviously they like Randall and that veteran presence. Even without Aaron Rodgers here, they still like them some Randall Cobb. But I think there's another reason on top of that. I think there's a chance he could have fell out of favor with this regime and possibly Aaron Rodgers as well. I'm sure losing Aaron Rodgers this year didn't necessarily help things. In the first game, they made it pretty clear that, the game plan changed very quickly. And maybe with Zach Wilson, Hardman doesn't necessarily fit into what they're trying to do. Although, again, if you have someone who's that speedy and explosive, I would just try to find creative ways to get the ball in his hand. It's weird. This whole situation is just very, very bizarre. But again, where you are now, I don't know if there's a way to just completely salvage it, and you might as well, I guess, move off. But he also, if you remember going back to training camp, he had a few drops in training camp. So maybe Rodgers lost trust or Hackett lost trust. And with how Xavier Gipson played, maybe they just feel comfortable saying, you know what, we can slot everyone up a spot. And essentially now what it would be, you're going to have Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, Xavier Gipson as your main 4 receivers. Irv Charles is someone that they activated this past week because of his special teams ability. He made a really nice play on special teams. Maybe they're comfortable with going with those young guys. They talked up Jason Brownlee a lot. So I think moving off Hardman does make you a little bit weaker if there's an injury. God forbid there's an injury to the wide receiver room. That thing could go off the rails real quick if you move on from Mecole Hardman. But again, that kind of just feels like the direction that this thing is going to go. And I guess, like, I don't think you're going to be able to get a whole lot for him. Like, I've seen people be like, "Oh, trade him for an offensive tackle." It's not, it doesn't really work that way. It's very rare you see a player swap trade like that. And for someone of that caliber, like, if you're just trading Mecole Hardman at this point, you're probably getting like a 6th round pick or something like that for him. Van Jefferson just went earlier today for a late pick. I think that's going to be something similar that you would see from Hardman if he was to be moved. I think it'd be a similar trade to what we just saw earlier today. The Falcons acquired Van Jefferson for a pick swap in 2025. It might not even be, just a 6th round pick straight up. So it's a 6th and 7th round pick swap in 2025. Again, we'll see if they're able to get anything out of it, or if Joe Douglas would be able to get a little bit more out of Mecole Hardman. But I think that's probably the direction that this thing's going to end up going. And, if you're looking at teams where he could end up right back with the Kansas City Chiefs. That wouldn't surprise me at all. He worked well with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. The Panthers are supposedly looking for a wide receiver. The Vikings, maybe, with Justin Jefferson going down, they want to take a flyer on somebody if they're still trying to get this thing in gear, which I don't know why they are, but they are. They're not going to be able to flip him for an offensive lineman. You can get that idea out of your head. Even if you attach a broken Carl Lawson, like, the Jets are going to try to move Carl Lawson. I don't think they're going to be able to do it because he looks really busted. But I think Hardman is someone who does get moved by the trade deadline. And either a late round pick, a pick swap next year, something along those lines, I think would be the move and something that they would do. And I get it. Like, he doesn't have a role right now. And it's strange, you signed him to a 1-year deal. It's not the end of the world because it is only a 1-year deal. It didn't work out. It was a whiff, but not something that's completely catastrophic. It was just very weird how this wide receiver room ended up shaking out for the New York Jets. They had Elijah Moore, who they traded away. They had Corey Davis, who retires or steps away from football. Bring in Hardman. He gets moved. It's just strange season for this wide receiver room, but certainly looks like things are trending towards him leaving the New York Jets, and that's my prediction. I do think he gets traded. I don't know if it's necessarily the right call. I would probably rather them keep him and use him, but it doesn't feel like Nathaniel Hackett and the New York Jets are going to do that. So let me know your thoughts on the situation down below in the comments. Sound off below. I am Matt O'Leary. Subscribe if you're new. Give a like. I'll catch you next time.